generation, a lot of money and time has been spent on the use of biotechnology to improve the quality and quantity of the food supply. The current prediction for the growth of the population in the coming decades is the main reason for this. There would be less land and more people, so there would not be sufficient food for everyone. Because of this, people have genetically engineered food, especially crops. This technology, known as genetic engineering, is when DNA is inserted into the genome of an organism. For example, if we genetically modify a plant, new DNA is transferred into these plant cells. The seeds produced by this plant now will inherit the new DNA. All characteristics of organisms are determined by their genetic makeup and how they respond to their environment. The genetic makeup is in the genome, and it usually carries the instructions for making proteins in an organism. So for example, the color of a flower would be because of its genetic makeup. So when we genetically modify an organism, we add a specific stretch of DNA into the genome, giving it new characteristics.
How is this useful for the food supply? Well, people believed that biotechnology had the potential for having a positive impact on the food supply. Since then, it became known there was also the potential risk of allergic reactions to biotech proteins. In the online library written by Samuel B.L., the primary allergy dangers to consumers from genetic modification crops can be placed in three categories. Valera highlights potential risks for allergy consumers. This is further explained through the primary allergy risks to consumers from genetically modified crops and how there are many classifications of these allergy risks. The main classification addressing the most elevated danger to the cross-reactive allergen is the exchange of a known allergen or cross-active allergen to food crops. For instance, setting a gene encoding a known nut allergen into corn would make this genetic modification crop risky to all people who have nut allergies. An event that had an analogous situation would be an enhanced soybean which expressed a Brazil nut protein. An analyst by the name of Stephen Taylor researched in his laboratory. Hence, the development of this transgenic soybean expressing a Brazil nut allergen was stopped. The biggest threat caused by genetically engineered foods is that they can have harmful effects on the human body. It is believed that consumption of these genetically engineered foods can cause the development of diseases that are immune to antibiotics. Besides, as these foods are new inventions, not much is known about their long-term effects on human beings. If you pick up a box of cereal or a product that contains corn, you are likely holding a genetically modified product, not just corn. But it is estimated that over 70% of processed foods in the United States alone contain genetically modified ingredients which are mostly soy or corn. Monsanto claimed and proved the corn varieties were safe to consume. But researchers affiliated with the Committee for the Independent Research and Information on Genetic Engineering proved that genetically modified foods such as corn can harm the human body with a potential kidney and liver problem. This is for all three modified corn varieties, and it also harmed the heart, adrenal glands, and spleen. To prove this, researchers have tested genetically modified corn on rats.
Corn, which is genetically engineered to be pesticide tolerant or insect resistant, makes up 88% of the corn crops across the US. In the USA, labeling of genetically modified food is not required, so people don't know exactly what they're eating. To prove that genetically modified corn is harmful, researchers have tested genetically modified corn on rats. They fed laboratory rats a diet of genetically engineered Roundup Ready corn for over 2 years. The results shown were as follows. Half the males and 70% of the females who had eaten the corn died prematurely. Animals on this diet suffered breast tumors and severe damage to the kidney and liver. This is not just for rats. This could mean the same thing for humans who heavily eat this genetically engineered food. They could also be at risk of dying prematurely. That's why we should say no to GMOs. Here is a poster of why we should say no to GMOs, genetically modified organisms. Genetically Modified Corn, Environmental Benefits and Risks is an article written by Virginia Gowen. In this article, Gowen highlights the pros and cons of genetically modified corn and how it impacts the environment. The negatives of genetically modified corn override the positive effects, as it has the potential for kidney and liver damage. It can also cut away years of your lifetime. Gene flow is another major factor because it could spread harmful traits to other plants in the vicinity and create more superweeds. Let's dive deep into the article. Gene flow is a natural process that contributes to species evolution. It is important to keep in mind that gene flow is a crucial, natural process that allows for the growth of beneficial traits in plants. While gene flow is a crucial biological process and can be immensely helpful to breed beneficial genes and traits to a species, it also poses a threat to its plant species for the same reason. Gene flow, due to cross-pollination, for the traits involving resistance can cause the development of tolerant or resistant weeds that are difficult to eradicate. Genetically engineered crops could lead to erosion of biodiversity and pollute gene pools of endangered plant species. For example, genetically engineered crops have a contribution to the evolution of superweeds. At first, these genetically modified crops prevented weeds, but over time, they became resistant to the traits given to these genetically modified crops and have become superweeds. Superweeds are weeds that are mostly immune to herbicides. The NCBI, written by A.S. Bauer and K.R. Anila Kumar, calls attention to genetically modified corn grown in countries, the United States in particular. This is further explained when mentioned that most corn grown in the United States alone is genetically modified. Imagine the number of superweeds they are bringing. This not just affects the corn crop itself, but crops around it as well. This will mean that farmers would have to work much harder to get rid of these weeds so they can get products to sell.
The discovery of genetic modification is quite important as its technology and techniques can impact the way of agriculture. In numerous ways, genetic modification can enhance production agriculture, ensure better harvest and food safety, and reduce the environmental impact of the food system. The democracy in whom are affected by genetic modification mostly include farmers and those who work with agriculture. With economic consequences, good or bad, farmers are impacted by the discovery of genetic modification. Currently, 2 to 8% of the population are at risk of different types of food allergens. Those who consume genetically modified foods are also impacted by this discovery, as those with allergy risks may be in danger. Genetically modified foods affect both genders, especially females. As aforementioned, half the males and 70% of the females who had eaten the corn died prematurely in the rat experiment. Additionally, genetically modified foods would mostly affect elder people. Questions we still have after conducting research on this topic include: what kind of GM foods are on the market internationally? What would the consequences be in cultivation of GM crop varieties for farmers? Additionally, do genetically modified foods affect a human's memory and intellectual ability? If so, how?